Assalamualaikum, Dr. Abbas, are you there?
Waalaikumsalam. Yeah, Prof, I'm here.
Apa khabar? How are you?
Alhamdulillah. I'm doing okay, just a bit nervous.
Don't worry, it's among friends here.
Yeah.
So I guess you've been busy preparing for... Dr. Abbas, are you there? Waalaikumsalam.
Prof, I'm here.
Apa khabar? How are you?
Alhamdulillah. It's I can hear echo, Prof.
Don't worry. Oh, echo. Oh, that's echo.
Yeah. It's like
Yes, you've been busy.
rewind and playback. You are muted, Prof. I cannot hear you.
Yeah, well, during this March, I'm just saying that during March, we try to bring in more speakers from BSM and also from outside before the semester start.
Yeah. Actually, I requested to do it in sometime in April or May, but it's okay.
Yeah.
This is my first time, and that's why I feel very nervous. Sebelum ni pernah main as a participant, not as a speaker, kan?
Yeah, but there's
Yeah.
always first time for everything, and
That's right.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's normal lah.
Yeah.
That's normal. Don't worry.
I consulted siapa ni Kiman. Chua Kiman. Yeah.
Kiman is here. Hi, Kiman. Good morning.
Yeah.
Oh, Kiman joined WebEx, eh? Okay, no problem.
Kiman is now part of USM, Prof.
Oh yeah, betul lah. Kiman but Kiman, but he's still in Sarawak kot. Belum main Penang kot.
Physically there, but he is roh dia dekat USM dah.
Officially USM, yes.
Yeah.
Kita akan mulakan 2 minit lagi. We will start on time. On YouTube. This is also stream live on YouTube. We have a few people on YouTube. So I can see some of the clicks from the PNP. Dr. Hazril here. Can see.
Oh, Dr. Hazril is here?
Yeah.
Okay.
Diana here. Dr. Hong Menchi.
Hi, Prof.
Hi. You're same batch dengan Dr. Abbas kan masa PNP? Is it?
I don't think so.
Different batch, eh?
Yeah, even the name sounds not so familiar to me.
Okay.
Hazril, yes.
Hazril sekali kan? Hazril, Diana mungkin different
Yes,
batch.
sekali, Prof.
Sekali, eh? So, ini nak bagi sokongan lah ni?
Nah, bagi moral support.
Yalah, macam tu lah. Kita kena bagi sokongan ke kawan-kawan kita.
Yeah. Bila nak panggil Hazril pula, Prof?
Hazril boleh bagi tahu apa? Boleh kalau nak offer. Actually, it's open to everyone. Actually, yeah, this is open to everyone who want to share anything using a CDAE platform. As long as it's within teaching and learning or education punya context, you are most welcome to give any sharing topic.
Prof still completing my teacher all the necessary to sah jawatan.
Oh, okay. Yeah. All right, so it's 9:30. So let us start. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh.
我哋咁住個 positive fans 唔知道放喺你。
Okay. Once again, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh. Good morning dan selamat sejahtera to all our fellow lecturers, colleagues, academics joining the session this morning, and also our fellow lecturers and academics joining through YouTube. The session this morning is streamed live also to YouTube. So welcome to our webinar series. This is a webinar series brought to you by Center for Development of Academic Excellence, or CDAE, or Pusat Pembangunan Kecemerlangan Akademik. CDAE is given the task to run a professional development program for our lecturers in the area of pedagogy, as well as using integration of technology in our teaching and learning. And over the years, one of the areas which are probably lacking and still lacking is on the area of assessment. And with the pandemic, where everyone has to go online and do their teaching online, the area of the aspect of assessment become even more critical. So I think it's timely to bring more topics on assessment and bring more experts in our program so that you can learn more on assessment. It can be quite confusing for us who are not from education background, because there's terminologies that sometimes foreign to us. So to me, the experts sometimes are responsible to confuse us. The experts, they have this blind spot. They like, or they have a tendency to use their own language, their own terminology without, sometimes they don't really pay attention to whether people understand or not. So in assessment, we have formative assessment, summative assessment, all sort of terminologies. So today, our speakers here, whom I invite, give a special invitation for him. So our speaker here is from our own, Dr. Ala Baks Muhammad Ayub Khan, or the short name, I always call him Dr. Abbas. Yeah. Dr. Abbas is from School of Pusat Pengajian Bahasa Literasi dan Pusat Pengajian Bahasa Literasi dan Terjemahan, ataupun SOLAT, in short. And it's still, I would say, relatively new in USM, but I'm very happy that he accepted my invitation, because I want to, bring more and more young academics or junior academics and make them visible. So I give them the opportunity to share, so that you don't have to wait until 10 years before you think you are ready to share your expertise. So this, I think, the opportunity that I'm opening this opportunities for everyone. If you are interested to give any sharing on any topic related to teaching and learning, or on education or higher education especially, feel free to contact me, and I can provide you the platform here, just like Dr. Abbas today. So thank you very much, Dr. Abbas, for accepting my invitation and for sharing your expertise today. And I understand today you will be sharing with us this topic, demystifying the misconceptions about formative, summative dichotomy. Yeah. I think without much ado, I will pass the session to you, Dr. Abbas. You can start now.
Okay, thank you, Prof. I'm sharing my screen now. I think you have to stop sharing, I think.
Yeah, it's from our, yeah, our secretariat.
Okay.
Okay, it's coming up. Okay, can see the slide.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. I can feel my heart pumping. Okay. Assalamualaikum. Good morning, Professor Abdul Karim alias. I look for Dr. Azida, Associate Professor Dr. Azida. She is not here. She texted me. She is unable to join today. She has something on. And fellow friends, like Prof. Karim mentioned. First of all, I would like to thank both Professor Abdul Karim alias and Associate Professor Dr. Azida for kindly extending this invitation to me. Actually, I was invited last year by Prof. Karim, but like Prof. Karim mentioned just now, I was not ready. So I tried to, frankly speaking, escape, and I managed to escape. But for this year, since he invited me again, and followed by Dr. Azida as well, I felt bad, and I thought, okay, I think I should give it a try and improve on sharing sessions later on. So thank you very much, Prof. Karim and Dr. Azida for inviting me. So
A pleasure.
yeah. Okay, for today's sharing session, I would not like to use the term talk because it sounds like someone prominent from somewhere like Oxford or Cambridge is invited to deliver a talk. I don't consider myself that way. I would consider this is a sharing session. And with regards to the topic that I have identified, I would like to share my understanding with my fellow colleagues, both from, from all, whoever is attending this session. So the topic is demystifying the misconceptions about formative, summative dichotomy. So in this talk, I will try to offer an overview of assessment. In this part, I will cover, like Prof. Karim mentioned just now, mostly terminologies are involved. And mostly, from my observation, when it comes to these terminologies, people usually, they develop some kind of general understanding, and they try to simplify in a way that they can understand the concept better, that they can understand and remember better. Unfortunately, when that happens, sometimes we use terms interchangeably without thinking much about the theoretical underpinnings behind the terms. I'm glad Prof. Karim mentioned that. So to address that matter, I will try to discuss this terminologies here, although not so in detail, because I was worried if I go into so much of detail, that would confuse the participants. And in a way, it would backfire on me as well, because I think there would be questions by the participants. Question and answer session is something, when it comes to asking questions, it's easier, but answering them is definitely very challenging. So I try to explain as much as I can. And then I'll move on to the formative, summative dichotomy. When we say formative, summative dichotomy, as we know, when we talk about assessment, one particular thing that crosses everyone's mind is examination. Examination is something if you were to Google or find out the history of examination, it actually started in Asia, specifically in China. But there are also some sources which claim examination started, the history of it began in the Western part of the world. But most of the studies in the literature, they claim actually the history began in China and in Asia, and it spread elsewhere. I think that shows why we are so examination oriented, because we are the ones who started it and we cannot let go of the examination. It's like in our blood. Okay? So when we say examination, it is automatically categorized as a summative component. Summative is something that comes at the end of teaching and learning process. We carry out teaching and learning depending on what level we are talking about. Maybe it's a school context, and let's say, for example, it's a secondary Form 1, from the beginning until the end. So at the end of Form 1, students are required to sit for an exam. And that exam, which could be like maybe 2 hours or 3 hours, we assess the students' learning outcomes, the achievement. Okay? There are some arguments about it. They say, is that fair for that student to undergo lessons for the whole year, and you only assess the student in just 3 hours? That's one main argument. People talk about summative assessment. That's why the formative component comes in. Okay, but how formative assessment fits this dichotomy? Reviewing the literature, it shows they are like competing against each other. It's like formative or summative. You have to choose one. That's the impression many studies have given to readers, and people are trying to apply the concept in real life in classrooms. However, a synergistic system of formative and summative components being in the same paradigm is also proposed. And many countries, many education systems have actually opted for this particular system, including Malaysia. I will go into the details after this. So yeah, that's the outline. I gave you some hints about how or what I'm going to cover in this session. So this is basically the summary, the synopsis of what I'm going to cover. You may have already read this, so I don't think we have to spend much time on this. Okay, now I would like to do a little activity here using Menti. So I hope you could go to menti.com, use this code and try to answer the questions. I only have 2 questions actually. So is that possible? The code is 99109748. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing the screen. Okay. Okay, people have started responding. Continuous and ongoing assessment. Panoramic, wow, interesting. Exam, test, picture, coursework component, interesting. I can see a lot of ongoing, continuous coursework. Specific, don't know how specific it is. Assessment. Okay. Academic progress. Picture. process, yeah, interactions, improvement, interesting, good. Okay, let's give some time for responses. Feedback. I can see the word feedback. Wow, okay. Quiz. Okay. Alternative. Interesting. Cumulative. Okay, right. Assessment to improve. Interesting. Review. Wow. Progress monitoring. Coursework component. Okay, keep the responses coming. We will wait for another few minutes. I don't know how many. Yeah. Classroom-based. Assessment for learning. Assessment for learning, assessment to improve. They both point to the same thing actually, but the specific term used in the literature is assessment for learning. Okay, that's question one. I have another question. Okay, the second one. What formative assessment activities you conduct in your course? I don't know. I suppose the audiences here are diverse. I come from language background, and I'm in USM School of Languages. So you could be from another context. So just the course can be replaced with a classroom, or whatever setting that you are involved in. Portfolio, weekly feedback. Wow. Weekly feedback. That's interesting. Writing test. IOP. The IOP must be from my school. It's a specific term. Mini project, tutorial, hands-on practical, homework. Interesting. So the responses here, they show me that maybe my hunch is many of you or many of the audiences here, you have gauged the concept of formative assessment in your own context, I think. MCQ, yeah, MCQ, it can be formative as well, depending on how you conduct it. Student meetings, okay, student meetings, interesting. Lesson-based discussions, okay. So far the weekly feedback is dominating everything else. Mind map, games. Okay, a few more minutes, eh? Okay. Yeah, I think it's early in the morning, so people are still warming up, I think, Prof. Yeah, it's okay. But I appreciate those who have responded. Okay, we may come back to this responses later on when we go into Oh, you sent twice. Yeah, actually, I allowed each participant to make 2 submissions, actually. Okay. But I don't know which one Prof. Karim's answer. Hot seat. Wow, hot seat. Okay. I don't know. This is something new to me. Role play, yes. Role play. Hot seat, I don't know. Where does this fit? I have not come across this term yet. The others all look familiar to me. Hot seat. Okay. You can keep the responses coming. So I will go on with my, I'm going to stop sharing this. I'm going to share my PowerPoint. Okay, I wanted to make this statement or the explanation at the beginning of my talk, but I forgot. Over the weeks, CDAE has organized many webinars, which has focused a lot on how to do's. For example, the very recent webinar by Chua Kiman, which focused on formative assessment as well, but his was more to the technological side, using online tools to conduct formative assessment. It was escape room or something. Okay, and there was also another one, which I can't remember now. So considering the how to do's have been conducted, but the focus on the theoretical part was lacking from my observation. So I thought of covering that theoretical part, and that's why I decided to come up with this topic to cover the theoretical aspect. Because sometimes when we go too advanced, we have the tendency to forget or overlook or disregard the fundamentals, the basics. Okay, so that's why I decided to talk about this. And how do I say it? I prepared many slides actually, but upon reviewing the slides, I thought this looked very theoretical. So I tried to cut down as many as possible, and I tried to make it as simple as I can. Okay, because of participants end up being confused. Okay, some terminologies. Some terminologies. When we use the term assessment, it is actually the big umbrella. It is the big umbrella. It actually covers almost every testing component which is involved. For example, we have quiz, we have assignment. The assignment can be in many forms. Written assignment, students reviewing each other's work, and some of us in USM, we may know better. If we look at the BPK form, you will see one table. That's where you identify a suitable assessment component in line with the course outcomes that you have devised. Okay, test and examination. You talk about all these components, they all come under the term assessment, right? So if you talk about test and examination, one dominant difference between these two is in terms of the way they are designed. Test is usually, although it resembles examination, but examination is expected to be more complex. And therefore, the duration for students to complete the task is relatively longer. Compared to a test, which may only last for 1 hour until 1.5 hours, 1.5 hours, and it's not as complex as an examination. Yeah. So when we say formative assessment and summative assessment, it refers to the testing components, and more importantly, the purpose. The purpose. What is the purpose of you conducting a test, for example? A test can be summative, it can also be formative, depending on what you want to do. You want to promote learning, or you want to grade the student and report their learning outcomes to them and to others. It depends. So this is a general definition given by Syed Abbas Musavi. What is a summative assessment or test? Okay. It usually comes at the end of teaching and learning. As I mentioned earlier in this talk, the summative assessment, it comes at the end. It comes at the end, and we assess the students' learning outcomes. What have they learned? Have they learned everything that you have covered in your course? And that understanding, you report their understanding, you report their ability to understand things, usually in the form of a letter grade or numerical grades, depending on how you want to report your achievement, students' achievement. Okay, it's known as endpoint testing because the testing component comes towards the end. And it usually provides a snapshot. It provides a snapshot of students' achievement. But there are many arguments about summative assessment or summative test. People don't usually, especially scholars, those prominent ones, they against this paradigm because many weaknesses are associated with it. We will come to that shortly. This is just to give you a general view about summative assessment. Okay, there is a question. Can we categorize assessment as learning as a formative assessment? Yes, definitely, Prof. It can be categorized as assessment as learning. And when we say assessment as learning, what is the focus? The focus is on students, bringing the students into the assessment picture, empowering the students, giving them power in the sense teachers are not the sole assessors. In a traditional setting, for example, it is the teacher who is the active member who shares knowledge, impart the knowledge. The students are mostly seen as passive recipients. Whereas when we talk about formative assessment, students are given the power. I will cover this later, Prof. It's a good question. Okay, formative. Unlike summative, which comes at the end, the formative assessment, it happens throughout. But it's a bit tricky there. When we say throughout, generally some questions that are asked are like, how frequently do we have to conduct formative assessment? What is the nature of formative assessment? If I conduct a quiz and I give them 10% for that quiz, is that considered formative or summative? There is written assignment. Students are supposed to submit in week 7, and that is graded. So that is considered formative or summative? Because when we refer to that assessment component, written assignment, the quiz, we usually refer to them as ongoing. We refer to them as something coursework component, and therefore it is formative. Okay, we will come to that shortly when we look at examples. So when we talk about formative assessment, it is conducted periodically during a course of instruction, and the purpose is actually to monitor student learning progress. And we want to give ongoing feedback. Please pay attention to the word feedback. We will come to that. In fact, that is what sets the formative assessment apart from summative assessment. Focus is on feedback. And in order to make the formative assessment work well, it is always advisable, this is what scholars have said, we try to limit the sample of learning task so that you can offer rich feedback, more detailed feedback, where students are able to understand. If you lump everything together, they may not be able to follow. An analogy that I found by Robert Stake, when the cook tastes the soup, that's formative evaluation. When the guests taste the soup, that's summative evaluation. So just put ourselves in the shoes of a chef or a cook, you are preparing the soup. While preparing, the chef will taste the soup at various stages, just to ensure the soup is it tastes good, right? At various stages. And then finally it goes to the guest. Only then they will taste. So the summative evaluation is something similar to the guests tasting the soup. Okay, now we come to formative, summative dichotomy. Some might be wondering, what does it mean by formative, summative dichotomy? What are we talking about here? Okay, formative, summative dichotomy, reviewing the literature, because literature is where we have to refer to. Because we do not have access to like classrooms. We cannot go into classrooms, for example, in schools. What's happening in terms of formative and summative? We cannot simply walk into a lecturer's lecture hall. We randomly walk into these lecture halls and see how formative, summative, people would not allow. So that's why the research comes in, and people carry out studies and they report the findings, and that's where we refer to see what's happening. So going by the literature, what is reported in the literature about findings of what others have done. Summative assessment is something about examination, endpoint testing. It happens at the end. It has been around for so long. It has been around for so long, even the formative assessment as well. But the focus has always been on the final examination due to many reasons. Okay, especially policymakers, for example, because for policymakers, they prefer the summative component. In fact, Ling Cheng, 2012, I did not cite it here. She has mentioned that summative component, final examination, is the darling of policymakers because they make things easier for them, especially decision making. They just have to look at the statistics, the overall picture. How many A's, how many B's, how many C's. Okay? But how it began, actually in 1967, Scriven, when he was looking into program evaluation, that's when this discussion actually started. So they started a new program, maybe, for example, a degree program, and then they want to evaluate how the degree program is progressing, whether it's progressing well or there are weaknesses. So they use this formative evaluation and summative evaluation. That's how it started. Until 1969, 2 years later, it was Bloom. He started applying the same concept to into teaching and learning. Okay, so the concept is, when we talk about formative, the evaluation happens throughout, and the summative, it's at the end. Okay, and I think it was Paul Black and Dylan William. They are the two professors, actually. They went even deeper from what Scriven and Bloom have actually looked into. So we may wonder what actually caused the dichotomy, which is better. Again, if you review the literature, you will find that summative component and formative component, they are competing against each other. So we need to know who is the hero, who is the villain. And as for now, if you look at the literature, you will find that the summative component is the villain, and the formative component is the hero. So those who are familiar with George Orwell's Animal Farm, you will realize, maybe you recall this: 4 legs good, 2 legs bad. So in this case, the 4 legs good, it refers to the formative assessment, which promotes learning. The 2 legs bad, it refers to the summative component, which spoils the learning due to various reasons. Like I said just now, summative exam, it has been around for so long, and there are various issues regarding summative assessment, which were raised by various scholars on a global scale, not just in Malaysia. But I totally agree if people claim until now our education system is an exam-oriented system. To me, in my opinion, it is true. We still value examination so much. We cannot let go examination. And as many weaknesses are associated with having only examination, summative examination, upon agreement by almost everyone, many countries, including Malaysia, we undertook some assessment reform. So what were the issues regarding examination? Maybe some of you can type in the chat box. What are the issues about exam? Setting a limit as in making the task to focus on a specific skill or LO. Yes, yeah, that was what I was talking about, Kiman. Yes, setting a limit as in making the task to focus on a specific skill or LO. Yes, that's right. Issues about exam, just a snapshot, one size fits all. Yes, yes, that's a good response. Thank you, Prof. Any other issues regarding exam? Actually, there are many things. Usually people become sometimes emotional when you talk about examination, especially teachers. Okay, no response. Never mind, it's okay. Flying colors. I'm sure most of us, we can relate. Whenever results come out, it doesn't matter it's a school level or university level. When an examination is over, the results come out. This is a very common scenario. Okay, issues on exam, the emotional state. Same like COVID test, very emotional. Yeah, I agree. Okay, so you get your results. You got an A+. And I think it's also very, very common for parents being very proud. Their children got a string of A's. Usually people, they brag about it. Although not all, some do, right? Because why? We value a string of A's. And I don't know how many actually think how much of learning has happened, how much my son or daughter has learned. Usually that aspect does not get focused. The focus is on A's. But unfortunately, not all are able to be in this scenario, as some will be under this category. Some will get C+, C category, and F. It's fail, right? So in both scenario, both the A and C+ or F, what is not clear is how did the student perform? What is the strength of that student? What is the weaknesses of the student, especially in this category, C+ and F? What needs improvement? And generally, it doesn't matter whether it's in university or in schools, the final exam does not give an opportunity for students to know what went wrong due to some bureaucracies, institutional policies, especially in schools. Of course, examination agencies like in our Majlis Peperiksaan, Lembaga Peperiksaan, they allow you to review how, if you are dissatisfied with the grade, you can check. But there are many procedures involved, and sometimes students, they just give up. They feel like, okay, whatever, just let go. Some they do. Okay, the state of emotional, psychological, and health affect the performance. If the timing is wrong, student will not perform. Yes, that's right. But this is with reference to reliability, Prof. Yeah, reliability of test in relation to students. Another issue is standardized testing. So standardized testing, there are many pros and cons actually. Like I said, policymakers, they prefer standardized testing because it's easier for them to get input, to make decisions. It's easier. Okay, but students, it may not be good for students. Standardized. I still remember my interview with the Lembaga Peperiksaan when I conducted my doctoral, conducted data collection for my doctoral dissertation. I looked into PT3, English subject. So what I was told there was in 2012, they reformed the assessment at the PT3 level, and a newer version. Before that, it was PMR. In 2014, it was Form 3 assessment of PT3. So under the new system, they used comparable standards. Before that, PMR was very standardized, meaning you live in, you are from Perlis, or you are in Johor, or you are in Kelantan, you get the same set of question papers for every subject. But when it came to PT3, under the new reform, what happened was they tried to use comparable standards, meaning you are in Perlis, you are still getting the questions under the same construct, same standard, but your question is different from my question who live in Penang. But the level is the same. And it seems parents, especially parents, they do not accept it. They say, no, cannot. My son in Penang and his friend in Johor, they are getting two different questions, and his friend scored higher than my son. How is that fair? So comparable standards, I think some people, they don't understand. So I think Lembaga actually tried to address this issue of standardized testing, but which actually was responded by some negative views. Yeah, but now I'm now in the middle of conducting another study, a follow-up study. Okay, so I will know what is happening on the ground after I completed my thesis. This is something that I think most of us are very familiar with. We have been seeing this, or maybe we have seen this many times. So it's written here, for a fair selection, everybody has to take the same exam. Please climb the tree. So a monkey, it is the nature of a monkey to swing from one tree to another, or from one branch to another within the same tree. But is that possible for an elephant to climb a tree? And how about a fish? So to some extent, if you talk about standardized testing, this is a reality that we have to look into. Okay, a question from Prof. Karim. We talk about differentiated learning, but when it comes to testing, standardized testing, do we have such thing as differentiated assessment? Differentiated assessment, to me, it still falls under an alternative assessment. In other words, it's a formative assessment. When we look at the literature, we will find we have standardized and we have alternative. Under alternative, they have a list of many terminologies which eventually point to the formative dimension of assessment. That's to my understanding, Prof. The elephant has to unlearn, yeah, unlearn and relearn. That's right. But I don't know how many can, in reality, students can do this, and what effort it would take, how much of time. And the fish has to forget about learning. Yeah. Some other issues. The conventional testing methods, which is summative, they do not provide, like I said just now in the example, at school level, final examination. Also in higher learning institutions, final examination. Usually, most of the time, we do not have any opportunity to provide detailed feedback to students. But if you check with the students, they really want to know, what is my weakness? What is my strength? They want to know. But I don't know in future how things would change and how much of how changes would occur, and students would have the opportunity to know more about how they performed in exam. Another issue, stakes. Usually high stakes. A test becomes high stakes when it has serious implications on almost everyone, especially the student. Think about SPM examination. The result is used for students to apply for scholarship. You get straight A's, almost guaranteed you will get the scholarship, compared to your result is not so good, average, or even below. You may not succeed. You may not even be shortlisted. That is a high stake exam. So when the stakes is high, usually, as reported in the literature, students become they worship the exam. They worship the exam, literally. And they try to know every ins and outs of the format. What kind of question is repeated? How to tackle this type of question? How to tackle that kind of question? So when the focus shift towards that kind of practices, learning gets affected adversely. Okay? The problems associated with teacher-made tests, which may potentially focus more on grading than the learning purposes. This reminds me of what happened in the UK recently. I don't know, maybe some of you have followed this. A teacher-made test was used last year in the UK for students at GCSE level, and it created a lot of problems for them because the results, the grades given by teachers were higher, but when it reached their educational authorities, some moderation was carried out using some algorithm, and the grades went down, and the students became angry. That is what this point is referring to here. So, as many weaknesses associated with summative assessment, that's when the formative assessment began rising as an alternative to summative assessment. And formative assessment, it offers more space, many opportunities for teachers and students to make use of feedback. Yeah. So the question now is, this is what is happening as reported in the literature. Which one should we go for? We should support formative assessment. We should only employ formative assessment, or we should stick to summative assessment, the summative component. So the 4 legs refer to the formative and 2 legs refer to the summative. Which is preferable? Maybe some of us or many of us here, we say, I think formative assessment should be the focus, because to my understanding, formative assessment is learning oriented, and that's what we should get our students to do, and therefore we should go for formative assessment. But as you can see in the case of Malaysia, in schools especially, UPSR level, we started this KSSR. It started in 2011, and the first batch of students, they were tested using KSSR in 2016. And KSSM started in 2012, and they were tested in 2014 at PT3 level, and later in SPM, I think 2017. Okay, so the assessment used in Malaysia, for example, we use a synergistic system in which the formative component and summative component, they complement each other. They complement each other. So we make use of both without having them compete against each other. That's the concept that is being tried out, tested out almost everywhere. So I did ask you earlier, and I did share this definition. What does the literature say about formative assessment? It is seen as a hero. It is seen as a good assessment compared to the bad guy, the villain, the summative assessment. Okay, so the impression given by research findings is that more focus should be paid on formative assessment and not summative assessment. I don't know how many of us here are familiar with this book. This book was written by Paul Black and Dylan William. They actually conducted a systematic literature review. This happened in 1998. 1998, when Scriven started the discussion about formative evaluation, summative evaluation, about program level, and later it was taken up by Bloom in 1969. And then these professors, they followed up, they linked it to teaching and learning, and they found formative assessment very useful. It's very significant in increasing students' learning outcomes. So everyone started paying attention to this. And since 1998 until now, you will not miss these two names, Black and William, in studies talking about formative and summative assessment, especially inside the black box. In fact, I would say that was a turning point for the discussion into formative and summative assessment after the publication of Inside the Black Box. So what does the literature say? The point that I just talked about. But a synergistic system is now being promoted everywhere to have both components work together, not competing against each other. Okay, so I talked about the Malaysian case. We are now trying to promote a synergistic system, KSSR, KSSM. And how does a synergistic system actually work? How does it work? They work harmoniously. They complement each other. In the case of, for example, PT3 level, we have two components. We have the formative component, and let's say we talk about one specific subject, English language subject. We have the formative component. For the formative component, we have a band scale, band 1 until band 6. 1 being the lowest and 6 being the highest. And each band has its descriptors. If the student is at band 1 level, this is the student's level. And usually the description is very detailed, depending on what subject the student is taking. And the teacher would usually provide a detailed report for that formative component. And we have the summative component, which happens at the end of Form 3 level, in the form of a final exam. So when these two components are there, usually some correlation is found. For example, we talk about sejarah. The student got a band 5 in the formative component. And the summative part, maybe they are given letter grades. So for a band 5, the student by right should be somewhere around B+ to A-. So there should be a correlation. If the student got a band 5 for the formative component with the detailed feedback given by the teacher, but the summative component, the student got maybe D or C-. So that's something wrong there. There's something wrong. Maybe there are some mistakes, maybe. Okay. So that's how the synergistic system, in which we have the formative and summative component, they work together. And if we take a closer look, we also have the similar concept in higher learning institutions, in universities. Okay, we know a lot about the summative component, test, exam. From my observation, what is lacking is information about formative assessment. And especially when we talk about a synergistic system, how does the formative component fit into the synergistic system? When we talk about summative, automatically we know it's exam. It comes at the end. Written assignment, students submit it in this week. Quiz, it's conducted in this week. oral presentation. It comes in this week. It's very clear. Although there are some differences in opinion, there could be some differences in opinion, in the sense that the assignment component is a coursework, it's formative. The oral presentation is a coursework component and it's formative. But usually people do not go any further than telling you it's ongoing, it's formative. That's why I say, so far it's not very clear. How does the formative component fit into the synergistic system? So let's find out a bit more about formative assessment. How do we define it? What are the significant features? That's how it fits into the paradigm, formative, summative dichotomy. How does it fit in? And more importantly, how does it work? Or rather than asking how does it work, how can we make it work? Okay, I think there are some questions. Yeah, formative assessment is good if teachers are properly trained to design a meaningful and impactful assessment. Yes, Prof, I agree. But I don't know if you are familiar with the concept. We call this in assessment backwash or washback. In fact, I have now secured a grant looking into the backwash effect in USM. The concept says examinations, we have examinations, and we know that societies value examinations. So why not we make use of examinations to our benefit? Meaning, for example, in the case of schools, kebat, soalan kebat, thoughts, questions, higher order thinking skills. So logically speaking, if you want to promote higher order thinking skills, what we should do to make it more effective, to train the teachers in stages, make them understand what kebat is, what higher order thinking skills is, and only then we implement it slowly in teaching and learning and assess in exam. But practically, it would take a very long time. So that's why mostly what policymakers do is the thing that they want to include or they want the students to learn is they include it in the exam. When you include it in the exam, it becomes something like, oh, HOTS, it's included in exam. If I don't know what HOTS is, if I don't know how to answer the question, HOTS question, I will fail. So they will panic and they will start focusing on what is included in the exam. That is washback, meaning we use the exam to our benefit. And that would reduce costing, that would reduce and save many, a lot of things, time, money. But a lot of criticism has been reported in the literature when we use such a method. My concern is all these buzzword and terminologies introduced make it sound that we are doing something right, but on the ground, it's not that rosy. End up with the same old, and more of the same. Yeah, I agree. I agree, Prof. Yeah, some usually heard definitions of formative assessment. Okay, if you ask someone what is a formative assessment, they will say, well, formative assessment is not graded. It's ongoing one. Okay, I think the coursework is formative. Formative means no exam one. So from the responses given, you can clearly see these are provided by Malaysians. And I recall these conversations with friends, colleagues, and other people. So I just, as many that I could recall, I reported it here without revealing the sources, of course. Otherwise, I will receive a lot of phone calls. Formative assessment, I did talk about it earlier, the definition. I highlighted it in red, ongoing feedback. That's what sets the formative assessment. Oh, the picture cat is because this is like, it's me, curious about these responses. It's like, really? Okay, that kind of reaction. So I highlighted it in red, ongoing feedback. That's what sets the formative component apart from the summative one. I want to do this quick checking. Normal scenario, meaning we are not in this COVID-19 pandemic. Just assume this is a normal semester, everything goes on as usual, face-to-face, no online, nothing. So we have a quiz scheduled for week 3 and another one for week 6. It's formative or summative? In your opinion? Okay, Prof says it's formative. And we have the final examination at the end of the semester. It's formative or summative? Maybe Kiman. Kiman, I'm looking for Kiman. Yang lain-lain tak respon ke? Diana says it's summative. Yeah, final exam, summative. Okay, I expected this actually. Okay. 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 And this is the COVID scenario, COVID-19. We have a quiz scheduled for week 3 and another one for week 6. Maybe this refers to a school which opted for 100% coursework without the final exam component, right? And then we do not have the final exam. Since I said maybe this one refers to a school which opted for 100% coursework, and the online test at the end of the semester. It's not a final exam, but it's an online test which still comes under the what do we call it, coursework. So how do we look at it now under COVID? Do we still give the same answer? Formative and formative. Okay. So okay. Prof. Karim, I'm receiving some messages via chat box. Some of my colleagues say that they are not able to chat. They're not able to comment in the chat box. Maybe that's why. That's why they can send me message privately, but they are not able to send it to everyone. Quite a number have been messaging me actually. So now I know why there is no response.
Why? There's no. Usually, everyone can respond. I'm not sure why. Never mind.
Yeah.
Let's see whether we can do something here in terms of the setting.
Okay. Okay, Prof. Okay.
I have to make sure. Have to change the. I mean the audience in the chat box send to everyone. The setting should be sent to everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you those who message me, make sure send to everyone. If you put my name only, then it's me who received the message.
Yes.
And
Yes.
out of nervousness, I may not notice the message. Okay. Someone says there is no everyone available, Prof. There is no send to everyone option.
Oh ya.
Which
Tak apa nanti kita
yeah.
cuba tengok lah ada yang kita boleh buat setting kat sini.
Okay.
Sini the host Zana ke siapa ke ni? Please tengok ya.
Okay. So I move on. Okay. So just now the answer given was an interesting answer given by, I think it's Dr. Diana. For the first scenario, this is formative. I think Prof. Karim also said this is formative. And the final exam, we know that it's summative. And for the COVID scenario, both are formative. Okay. Usually, my response to that is whether the assessment component, for example, in this case, it's a quiz, and let's say it's 10%. It's in the form of MCQs, right? You have maybe 10 questions, each of them carry 1 mark, or 20 questions, each of them carry 0.5 marks, depending on how you design it, the level of difficulty, how you randomize the answers. Okay. How does it become? Whether it's formative or summative, it depends on the purpose. When it is a quiz and it is given 10%, you allocate 10% from your overall marks, it is automatically a summative component because it is graded. Because your school, for example, opted for 100% coursework, and this quiz carries 10%, and therefore it is automatically a summative test in the form of a quiz. So this is where the synergistic system comes in. How do we bring in the formative element, the formative aspect of assessment into this summative component? Is by offering feedback. That's why in the definition, I mentioned this ongoing feedback. It is graded, okay, due to policies, institutional policies maybe. Maybe it's not within your control unless you give out another quiz which is not graded. That is formative in true spirit. For this one, it is graded, but you can still bring in the formative element, the formative dimension of assessment into the picture by giving feedback. For example, question 1, the student got a wrong answer, assuming you conduct this quiz via e-learn. So you can make use of automated feedback. The student clicks the answer. After the quiz is over, the student is able to see what is the right answer along with the explanation for that answer. That becomes formative. If you conduct the quiz, it's 10%. They only know after the quiz over 10, how many percent they got. Maybe in the form of a letter grade, a B+. So as a student, I might wonder, what does the B+ actually refer to? How many questions did I get right? How many did I get wrong? Which question I got wrong? What is my weakness? What is my strength? So that part becomes invisible. I hope I did not confuse anyone. Okay. Someone asked a question. Then if we allocated 20% for assignment, then it is considered as summative. It doesn't matter how many percentage you allocate. As long as grade is associated with the performance, it is automatically summative. But we can minimize the deleterious or the adverse effects of the summative part by bringing in the formative element as much as we can by means of feedback. By means of feedback. So if you talk about written assignment, it again goes back to the feedback. Unless you design a written assignment which the students have to submit, which is not graded at all. But practically, is that possible? To me, that's not possible. We have like 14 to 15 semesters. And do you have the time to design a task and let the students do something without giving them any grade? Do the students want, although we are talking about the learning here compared to the grade? Okay. So I think it's clear. So it doesn't matter whether it's a normal scenario or COVID scenario, but the final examination, I did mention this earlier, usually most of the time there is no room, almost no room for students especially to know how did they perform. Like in the earlier examples I mentioned, in schools, if students did not perform well, they request to check their answer script. If they performed well, what they want to know is their strengths and weaknesses. And at times I feel pity with the students. They don't get the opportunity. Some just give up. Okay. So unlike the final exam component during normal times, under COVID scenario, this online test, since it comes under the coursework component, it is possible to share with the students feedback. But we have to be careful. Speaking from experience, when we say feedback, it refers to many things, including the grades. it is also a feedback. And majority of students, under the name of feedback, what they are really interested in is they want to know apa grade saya. Saya dapat apa? What did I get? That's what majority of them want to know. It's the grade. Some do want to know your detailed comments. How did you assess the script? What comments you have given? There is a lot of red marks, red underlinings. Some do pay attention to that, but maybe not that many. So the features of formative assessment is actually, like I said just now, the feedback is the most important feature that sets it apart from the summative component. And another feature of formative assessment is self-assessment, and this is what Prof. Karim mentioned earlier, assessment as learning. Not many actually do this from my observation because it is very tedious, and sometimes lecturers in universities and I think teachers in schools, maybe we don't like to share assessment related information with our students. I refer to an analogy by my friend, Associate Professor Dr. Atta Gibril from Egypt. I invited him for a talk in my school last time. So the analogy he used was teachers and lecturers alike, we treat the assessment related information as military secrets. Military secrets which we do not share with our students. They should not know. We try to cover as much as possible. That's, I think, to some extent, it's happening. So, self-assessment, okay, let's look at feedback first. What does it mean by feedback? Information provided by an agent. It could be a teacher, it could be your peer, it could be a book, your parent, and yourself, and your own experience. This is according to Hattie and Timperley. These are what people consider as feedback. And it's provided by an agent. These are the agents actually. So when we talk about feedback under formative assessment, the feedback actually comes from two sources in the classroom setting, by the teachers or lecturers. And what should we focus on actually when it comes to offering feedback to our students? What should we actually focus on? The most important thing to me, speaking from experience, is the content, because you are the expert of subject matter. In my case, for example, I teach reading and writing courses for first-year students in my school. So I consider myself as someone who has the knowledge about reading skills, writing skills, and that's what I should focus more on in giving feedback to my students. Other aspects I can consider, I can give feedback also. But recently, the last semester, I conducted a study with my own students about feedback. Okay. They say in the survey, in the findings, they say that the content should be the main focus of the feedback given by the lecturer, which means they don't consider the feedback given by their peers when it comes to the content, because the students look at the lecturers as the sole content subject matter expert. Maybe it is understood, they feel that, okay, he is my peer, she is my peer, her understanding and my understanding almost like 2 kali 5 compared to the lecturer. So he should be giving more detailed comment about feedback. It was confirmed by the students. Okay, so we refer to this as assessment for learning. Assessment for learning. And when giving feedback, if we do not have a specific document which could control the feedback given to students, we will be going in all directions. We will be going in all directions. Therefore, it is advisable to have a rubric in which you can adapt or adopt from online, yeah, or you can develop your own, so that you have the scope to focus on. Yeah, this one. Can we ask the students to assess their peers? This is something, there are some cultural issues here. Maybe not all students are serious about giving feedback. Some they do, some don't. For example, in my case, I asked my students to offer verbal feedback during the tutorial session in relation to the lecture topic. And for the same topic, they also provide a written comment to their peers. So in the written comment, it was anonymous, and they gave more detailed feedback compared to in the tutorials. In the tutorials, they were very like surface level comments. They did not address each aspect very in a very detailed manner. So there are some cultural aspects involved here. Some may ask, if you ask them to give feedback, are they serious about it? Will they be objective? Even the students themselves may ask this question: will my friends be objective in giving their feedback? Although the lecturer provides the a rubric and they follow that rubric. And then content. I just share with you my experience. Students feel it is the lecturer who should give detailed feedback about the content. Other aspects, my students say it is okay for the lecturer to ask my friends to give feedback to me with regards to these components. And again, they need rubric. Sometimes it's interesting to develop a rubric on your own together with your students. They will offer more ideas. They will offer more suggestions, what should be covered. Perhaps something that we should reflect on here. The theoretical underpinning is there because for under formative assessment, feedback is a significant feature, and therefore the feedback is given by two agents in the classroom setting. One is the lecturer or teacher, and the other is a peer. But you as a lecturer, how do you benefit from this peer feedback? It sometimes make you realize you may have overlooked some things by listening to the feedback given by the students. Sometimes they look at things differently, and that offers you a different perspective. Oh, okay, I think I missed that part. My students are able to identify that, so perhaps I should. So it makes the process more process complete. Yeah. Okay, there are some questions, I think. I do not have military secrets with my students, as they keep on asking, pressing for feedback. Yeah, I'm not surprised, Dr. Diana, because the moment you have given the impression to the students that you will offer feedback, they will go after you. They will go after you. Some are very extreme, some are very polite. Most of them, they will identify a representative. Message lah lecturer, tanya lah lecturer, macam tu. So usually you will have one person or two persons contact you, but there are like a huge crowd is behind this one person. But the main concern is the feedback. Okay, another question. I don't give students their grade, but I do go through the exam papers projects with them and give feedback as a class or individually if they request. Yeah, it's a good thing. But actually, knowing students, if you give feedback to one individual, they will spread the word around, and the others will start contacting you. So they will like, if I am that student who requested, and you gave me feedback, a very detailed one, and I'm able to see my strengths and weaknesses, I feel so, okay, my teacher gave me very good feedback. This is interesting. I know my problem now. So I will start sharing with my friends. I met my lecturer. She gave me very good feedback. I know my problem. Oh, really? Then that student will contact you, others. So what I'm trying to say is being selective. Being selective. Can you be selective? That's something you should think about. Unless it's a collaborative task. I don't know, you are referring to collaborative task or individual task. I don't know. Okay. What actually is the rationale behind not disclosing the scores to students? This was something new to me once I started working in US. It's the right of the institution. Excuse me. It's the right of the institution to devise its policies in terms of what can be revealed and what cannot be revealed. The policymakers have the justifications for it, and I don't think we, as how do I say it, we can oppose it. That's my opinion, right? But however, you can, I mean, we can try to negotiate, try to discuss, and arrive at a consensus about this, in my opinion. I was actually specifically told by the higher ups in my school not to disclose scores. Coursework mark. Yeah. 1 second. I just. Coursework mark. This is something I, yeah. Like I said, we don't know. Policymakers, perhaps it's advisable to, of course, policymakers, higher ups, they may not make statements publicly, but you can check with them. I'm sure they will be willing to share the reasons or the rationale behind what is the reason. I think we should still provide consistent feedback in terms of how well the students are doing. A progressive evaluation, yes. However, given the number of students that could prove too time consuming, that's right. That's right. I agree. The student enrollment is very high, and it may not be easy. It is time consuming. It is very tedious. But I'm not bragging, but speaking from experience, the feeling you get after looking at your students' reaction, they become very happy. They become very excited after you give them the feedback. That makes you, I don't know, it's beyond happiness actually. But yeah, one easy solution is collaborative task. Collaborative, not individual. If individual, I think we die. Yeah, because we have other things to focus on, other academic and non-academic commitments, right? Kiman says something here. I do feel we need to inculcate the open feedback culture where our feedback is visible and students can see them from time to time, like using tools in LMS, Learning Management System, so it won't be so time consuming to respond one-to-one. Yes, this is, you see, Kiman is an expert about this online sources. I agree with him. I think Prof. Karim also agrees with Kiman. Yeah. For big class, individual feedback is not practical. I totally agree, Prof. But we can do as a class feedback. But then, as a class feedback, perhaps we need to consider, for example, how specifically we need to go about it. Because some students, they do not like their friends to know what he or she got. They want a private conversation, a behind the door discussion. Whereas some students, they don't mind if you provide the feedback.
Thomas, can I interject? Can
Yes,
I just interject at this point?
Yes, sure, Prof.
I think when we give a class feedback, we don't point out to individual student because that could be, embarrass them. That could embarrass them. So what I normally do, I will collect all the things from the assignment that I can highlight. So it's a collective kind of feedback where I gather the points from different assignment, things that I need to highlight and kind of correct the misconception, things like that. So by doing that, actually, I'm addressing the everyone, because I take the points from everyone's assignment. So it's a collective kind of a collective feedback, taking into account the individual misconceptions and things that you want to highlight.
Yeah, I agree. That's good advice. Maybe perhaps I should try that as well, because it's very time consuming and very tedious. But in my case, it was group task, collaborative task, and I invited each group and discussed how they performed. So since they are in the same group, they did not mind knowing each other's, because everyone gets more or less the same grade. They are in the same group. But it's a good suggestion, Prof. I will take that into consideration. Okay, so I move on.
Yeah, carry on.
Yeah, when we talk about formative assessment, there are many things to do actually. Discussion. Now we go back to what was shared by the participants when I used the mentimeter just now. If you remember, many things were mentioned when I asked what is formative assessment, what formative assessment activities that you conduct in your classroom. And some interesting answers were given. And I remember mini project, ongoing, many things were mentioned. So there are many things you can do. For example, using games, you can have a discussion, you can ask them to do either individual or written assignment, regardless of the choice you make regarding the component. Questioning the way you interact with the students in offering feedback, questioning methods. This, I think Prof. Karim would love this. I explored more on this after Prof. Karim discussed this in PNP course last year. Perhaps the way he explained it made me more curious, and I explored, and I have been applying this in my course as much as possible. But it takes a lot of experience. You may not, for example, in my case, I have been very careful with the selection of the questioning method to my students. So these are some of the questioning methods which we can consider in having a discussion with our students with regards to their performance. Let's say they have completed a written assignment, they have submitted. You look at it, you can use ignoramus questioning method. So it's about playing dumb. You play dumb. But we can only play dumb about something that we are very clear about, but we pretend like we don't know. Unless you really don't know, then we are really dumb. We cannot play dumb there, right? So that would make the students to explain more, justify their answers, provide explanations, and so on. Another method is get fly. This is depending on the type of student you are dealing with. This usually applies to students who don't like to talk more, answer in 1 or 2 words. They don't like to engage in real conversation. So with that kind of students, I apply this get fly method. You provoke them, you annoy them a bit, they feel a bit intimidated, and they respond mostly. But have to be very careful, because sometimes you may end up fighting with the student depending on how you tackle it. Stingray method. We know stingray, when it unleashes its sting, that's the point here. They explain something, maybe it's not very clear to you, you suddenly poke them. So, are you sure what you say is right? Are you sure what you have written here is right? I don't think so. I think you got it wrong. Maybe I think it's like they get the impression that they have to redo the assignment, for example, depending on the situation, of course. So it would make the students to explain more. They will make the students really think. Yeah, and then midwife is also applies. It applies to students who are rather weak, do not talk much. So the midwife concept is helping a lady give birth. So in this case, you are helping students give birth to ideas, not babies. Yeah. So these are some of the techniques that we can apply, actually. Like I said, we have to be careful. Depending on the type of student, you have to identify the right questioning method. Self-assessment. Students are clear. If possible, we should make the students clear about the criteria for success. For example, how many learning outcomes or objectives are there? And which assessment task or component assess which learning outcome? So it goes back to the military secrets I mentioned earlier. For example, you have a written assignment, and then you are either using a marking scheme or a rubric. How you will be assessing the students following that rubric or the marking scheme, it has to be made clear to the students. When they are clear, they know more or less the almost exact criteria for success, and therefore they would try to achieve success as close to the criteria that you have set. Learning outcomes. To me, we have to share with our students what are the learning outcomes. What is a program outcome? What is a course outcome? And what is the learning taxonomy for this learning course outcome? What is the Wheel of Fortune by, what's the name? I forgot the name. Bloom's taxonomy. C4. What is C4? Cognitive domain, psychomotor domain. All we have to expose our students to it. That would help our students to develop a better understanding. Otherwise, they will just worship their lecturers. My lecturer is my standard. He says 2 plus 3 is 6. I just follow 2 plus 3 is 6. Coming back to the point that was raised earlier by Prof. Karim, assessment as learning. When we say assessment as learning, it refers to the student constituency, bringing the students into the assessment picture, making them or helping them self-regulate their learning. We try to help them self-regulate. And also, this is about empowering the students. They are part of the assessment process. Through peer assessment, we get the students to assess their peers. Of course, we identify whether you want your students to give feedback to their peers about the content, or you identify certain aspects which are rather simple, which the students can handle. It's up to you. And that, to me, has to be discussed with your students. And they are open about it, speaking from experience. And assess themselves. The one I mentioned just now, we just discussed, self-assessment. Share with them criteria for success. But that does not mean success, criteria for success means how do I get an A for this course? That is not the criteria for success. We should not misunderstand. How do I fulfill? How do I achieve the first course outcome at learning taxonomy of cognitive C4 level? And the assessment component is, for example, a written assignment. So what is the criteria for success? That is spelled out in the rubric. So that has to be shared with the students. They are clear about it. They will strive to achieve that level. Ideally, referring to the points earlier, this is how the synergistic system, in which we have formative component and summative component, assessment for learning and assessment as learning, they come under formative. Assessment of learning is summative. Assessment as learning and for learning, formative. Assessment of learning is summative. So they complement each other. They work together. The relationship is harmonious. This is what should happen, actually. Not focusing on the summative component and disregarding the formative component. Or we praise that formative assessment is the hero, learning-oriented, and we disregard the summative component. We have to keep them together. Be in a good relationship. Don't let them fight. There are some challenges, actually, when it comes to implementing formative assessment. I keep highlighting formative assessment because the summative part is clear. Happens towards the end, endpoint testing. Not necessarily at the right end of the semester. It can be somewhere in between, but still summative because we are grading them. The marks given is part of the overall marks given. So how do we fit the formative component into the synergistic system? That is the challenge. So while it can be argued that higher education institutions and lecturers tend to have more autonomy compared with teachers in the school sectors, lecturers face many different external pressures. For example, institution or professional bodies, even employers, for example. How many employers are willing to accept detailed feedback about your students? Or they just want to see you got 3.8 or 2.7. They just want to get simple results. They are not interested in getting detailed feedback. And they have their conceptions about 3.7, these are the characteristics. 2.7, these are the characteristics. So 2.7, kick out. 3.7, accept. Maybe. So this is something I have to agree because I'm also experiencing this. I think one colleague mentioned this, YKIT, I think, the student enrollment rate, the ratio of teacher or lecturer and student, and also doing other things, academic commitments, like, for example, research active. Research is part and parcel of lecturers, and therefore time consuming. Formative assessment is time consuming, very tedious, and we may find it challenging to implement formative assessment, which to me, the individual lecturer may have to do something about it. How do we manage time, for example? How do we make things easier, or maybe do something like what Kiman suggested just now, using the LMS rather than giving feedback one-to-one, or consider having more collaborative tasks and things like that. Oh, yeah, that's all from me. Thank you for your time. And I think there were some questions in the chat box. Industry washback effect, yes. Okay, question from YouTube. Question from YouTube. What are the key elements of a simple and comprehensive rubrics? Okay, simple and comprehensive rubrics. Okay, I should have shared some examples just now. Maybe out of nervousness, I overlooked that part.
The chat box.
Okay. How do I say it? Maybe you can have the course outcome, and then the assessment task, and then some information about it. Okay, it can be very simple, but I don't know. Prof, are you sharing the slides later with the participants? I have not sent the slides yet. I can include the rubrics in the PowerPoint, and I can.
Yeah, we can upload your slide to Google Drive, and we will link the Google Drive put the Google Drive link in below the video on YouTube.
Okay.
In the description part.
Okay. Sure, bro.
So please send your slides to our to CDAE.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So we want to answer some of the questions from YouTube.
Yes, I can see some questions here by Muhammad Hozaimi. Can we share the marking rubrics to the students so that they can have a clearer view of their own level? Okay, first of all, you have to be clear. What does it mean by marking rubrics? Rubrics, it refers to, for example, you assign the student with an activity, which is something, not the marking scheme, not the marking scheme. You cannot share the marking scheme with the students. Rubric is something different. Rubric is like a guideline. You have a set of, you have a list of categories in that rubric. For example, since Huzaimi is in language course, you have, for example, you have the component language component, you have the organization component, you have the content component. So each component get graded, and how do you grade it? How do you distinguish between a student who scored the highest mark versus someone who scored the lowest mark? These are the things that you have to share. Unlike the question is, for example, you are asking an essay. You have developed an essay question and you share the essay, sample essay or the exact essay answer. Can you share with the students? Definitely cannot. They would just copy and paste. I think that part you have to be clear. I think you're clear. I'm afraid you misunderstand my concept. I share the rubric with my students as an early signal on how, yes, that is what I'm talking about. That's right. Okay, industry washback. Okay, the key elements of a simple, okay, I will share this in the slides later. I will share with Prof. Karim, the CDAE, they will share with you. What is the ideal group size for group projects, especially in large groups, 150 students? How do I say it? But speaking from experience, we cannot have the same equal number in each group due to many reasons. Some they want to stick to their friends group. Some, for example, they couldn't find other groups. Some they just simply they were lost, and finally or suddenly they realized that they are a part of a group activity, so they become kelam kabut and just willing to join any group that is willing to accept them. So ideally, I would say, ideally, in my opinion, I think 5 or 6, manageable. 5 or 6 students in each group. Okay, what are the practical tips for allocating marks for group projects? How do we prevent group members from becoming free riders? This is an interesting question. I'm actually delivering a talk on this later in my PTJ because some students have complained about having free riders in their group. I think Prof. Karim would agree with me, and he has also consistently talked about this. Eventually, it boils down to integrity. That is the ultimate solution. Okay. Other than that, we can establish some mechanisms to minimize cheating or being a free rider. For example, asking the students to assess each other or come up with a table of contribution. And that has to be done transparently, where each student, they agree with the content of the table of contribution. For example, there are 5 students, and each of them, they have to list down what he or she contributed. And if it is a written assignment, I think that should be somehow made clear. Section A, who did it? Section B, who did it? So if that is made clear, that would minimize. They will have that fear from being a free rider. That would put them under stress a bit. Not stress, I would say. Make them worry. If my lecturer get to know that I'm a free rider, I will lose marks and therefore I may fail, and that would prevent them from being a free rider. What are the practical
on that,
tips for...
Tabas,
Yes,
on that so-called peer, macam peer evaluation, I call it, right?
yes,
Professor Fauzia from UUM recently in our webinar, I think
Okay.
have touched on that part as well. So maybe, you know, our audience here would like to check out that video, the
Okay.
recorded video on our YouTube channel, CDAE YouTube channel, to learn more about this so-called peer
Evaluation.
evaluation. There are some issues also there, but maybe, you know, we need to look at how we can address those issues.
Yeah, I agree, bro. What are the practical tips for allocating marks for group projects? How do we prevent... Okay. What are the practical tips for conducting formative assessment in... Where is the question? I lost it.
Scrolling.
In large groups, for example, 2 undergraduate courses times, say, 120 students. Oh, that's a tough question. The only suggestion that I can think of now is doing things as much collaborative as possible. Obviously, the student enrollment, and you are talking about 2 courses here, equally having 120 students, that's a lot. And if you are the only lecturer handling this, then that's a lot to me, actually. But doing things collaboratively is one way. Also, involving students in peer, I mean, employing feedback and getting the students involved in offering feedback to their peers, that would help you a bit. But when it comes to peer feedback, as a lecturer or as a teacher, we do not have to 100% rely on our students' views. To me personally, we pay attention to the part that we may have missed, we may have overlooked, and that their feedback, their perspective make you realize, okay, this is something that I missed. Okay, very interesting methods. These promote active interaction between students and teacher. They will be more alert and motivated to participate in the discussion. Okay, that's a comment. Okay. I tried Ignoramus, which actually activates the students' background knowledge and encourages them to elaborate. However, as you mentioned, Dr. Abbas, sometimes the students think you really don't know. So I use that for grammar-based activities. Your students think you don't know? However, as you mentioned, you really don't know. Is that what you meant? Your students think you don't know, or they don't know?
Okay, Dr. Abbas.
Yes.
Hi. Let me clarify if I understand ignoramus correctly, because
Okay.
In the slides earlier, you mentioned that ignoramus means playing dumb.
Yes.
Right? And it's a method of doing Socratic questioning.
Yes.
So how I do it is I pretend dumb, you know. So for example, if like I say like, okay, you know, the difference between active voice and passive voice, oh, you know, I forgot what's the difference, and then can anyone help me explain? So the students they are actually quite excited to show off their knowledge. But sometimes when you probe them to deeper components, they really think that you don't know. And then they start looking at each other. It's like, oh my God, and maybe this lecturer really doesn't know. And, you know, it's like asking us to answer instead. So, yeah, that's what I meant. Okay. So, yeah, I mean, we need to be careful on when to use this technique.
Yes, that's my response to you, actually. That means you did not play dumb well enough. That's my conclusion. You did not look dumb enough. Okay, agree with Prof as a collective feedback, but then again, in my case, for studio-based learning, my approach is pinpoint directly to the students, as most design courseworks are individual. Designers or players in the building industry need to learn under pressure to prepare them for industry. Okay. So here the concern is raised by Dr. Hazril is feedback being given individually, and therefore it is not so possible to conduct collaborative tasks, I think. Okay, but I don't know, nothing is mentioned about the student enrollment rate here, which I think may be manageable, maybe.
Yeah, this is a studio-based class, HBP, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think depends on the nature, right? The nature of the assessment and also the assignment.
Yes, Prof.
Like studio-based, like architecture, I think the feedback has to be kind of tailored or individualized so that they know exactly what they did wrong.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that's all, Prof. No more questions, I think.
No more question ya? I thought the last one tu dah ni.
Last one.
Wicked.
How do we overcome the heavily examination-oriented education? Major focus on reading and writing skills, time restrictions, and intense pressure from stakeholders to complete the syllabus. Formative assessments require more time to conduct, which is why many have relegated to summative assessment. There is no clear-cut answer to this, actually. In fact, I would say one person trying to get this synergistic assessment system in which we have the formative and summative working together harmoniously, we don't really expect everyone to conduct it in the same exact manner. For example, Kiman and I. Kiman is a teacher teaching an English course, intermediate level. I'm also teaching that English course at intermediate level, but different groups. So he could be doing something, trying to get this synergistic system work in his course. Although we are teaching the same course, same level, he could be doing things differently from me. We don't have to follow the exact same. It's about the individual. It's about you, how you want to make it work. Okay, so I hope that answers the question, Mr. Liu Waikit. It's a good question anyway. It often people highlight this matter. What is your view in giving students choice? For example, they can choose any 3 out of 5 questions to answer. Are you talking about a final exam in which you
final
have
exam. I think the final exam.
3 questions? That depends, actually. Why 3 questions? Is that because in your school it's a standard practice to have 4 questions and you let them choose 3 questions? There must be some rationale at the PTJ level, I think. I hope that answers the question. Can we use... Sorry, bro?
Yeah, there's the last question there.
Can we use assessment, formative or summative, as an absolute measure of learning outcome attainment? It sounds like you are trying to prioritize just one here, like what I told you earlier in the discussion, in the sharing session. We are trying to get them compete against each other, which I think we should try to stay away from. If possible, as much as possible, we should try to get them work harmoniously or work together. Yeah.
Well, it could be both, I think, Dr. Abbas. It could be
Yes.
both formative and summative. But can we say if we have done the assessment effectively, that learning has happened? So there's an absolute, we can use both formative and summative as an absolute measure, evidence of learning.
Yeah, that's possible, Prof. Yeah.
Okay. Right. So any more questions? I saw some question actually on rubric. I think it's quite common. any topic on assessment, there's always
A lot of
question
questions.
about rubric. Don't worry, we will have more coming soon on topics related to assessment. As I mentioned earlier at the very beginning, assessment is one weak area, I would say, that was still very lacking, and we are very much aware of this, not only for USM but for other institutions as well. So we will bring more topics on this. Dr. Muhammad Saiful Bahari.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he's supposed to give one recently, but I think probably in April onwards. So he will zoom in very specific on specific aspect of assessment. For example, how to create good MCQ, how to construct rubrics, different type of rubrics, what else? So very specific aspect on assessment. So today I think it's very good that Dr. Abbas talk about the general overview, the conceptual, the difference between formative and summative assessment, because I think there's still lack of understanding in that area as well, although we have been doing it, and maybe some misconception as well. So I think this become clearer to us some question on formative and summative assessment, and I'm sure there'll be more still question on this aspect. So don't worry, CDAE will bring you more topics on assessment, especially on the specific area, specific aspects. So do not miss sessions on assessment next time, because I think it's such a very important thing that we need to learn in order to improve our delivery and to improve students' learning experience, and most importantly, to improve students' learning.
Yes.
That's the bottom line at the end of the day. Learning must
Outcome.
happen. Yeah. So I would like to thank Dr. Abbas for giving us the insight on assessment. I think you feel so relieved now.
I'm so relieved, Prof.
You get a lot of questions. In fact, I encourage them to send tough questions for you. So I guess we will see more of you in the future. So my dear colleagues, let us give a big round of applause. Use the icon down there. Let us give Dr. Abbas a big round of applause together. Okay. As our appreciation. Yeah. So boleh Dr. Abbas more topics on assessment, or maybe
Inshallah,
more
Prof. Inshallah, Prof.
yeah. Together dengan Dr. Saiful mungkin, yeah.
Yeah, inshallah, yeah.
All right. So thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi. Have a nice weekend, everyone. Stay safe, stay
Waalaikumsalam.
healthy, and stay productive, and
Yes.
stay strong. All right. Stay strong.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
The recording will be available on YouTube. And don't forget to fill up the survey, borang penilaian, ya. Open for 20 minutes. If you don't fill up that form, please do not email us. Because that's easy. Isi borang, you get a CPD point. Okay? If you miss the borang for whatever reason, then wait for the next session to get a CPD point. All right. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye. Assalamualaikum, Prof.
Salam. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it very much. Hope it was beneficial.
Thank you.